Hey folks, this is Lance McBrayer with the Lance McBrayer Lab, and I'm hoping that you're going to have an amazing weekend. Mine just began today, actually, or this evening, because I work on Saturdays. But before I wanted this day to be done with, I wanted to get in my video because I promised myself and you that I would be doing a video a day, and I've been pretty much on track with that. Maybe give or take 1 or 2 days, maybe. I'll have to double check, but I think I've been on point. And either way, I'm still not going to stop. So even if I do miss a day or so here, I'm going to keep going until I'm making sure that I fulfill my promise to myself that I'm going to do a video every day of some sort. And so Thursday, I think, was a day that I actually didn't do a video, but I was live at an event that my friend gave, who was an artist, and I hope that that was just inspirational too. Shout out again to Mr. James Perry Jr. Anyway, I wanted to talk to you today about how we sometimes look at things in our past and allow them to affect us presently, as well as some folks will even allow that to affect them the rest of their lives. And so hopefully this story that I'm going to talk about by Mr. Alan Watts will give you some perspective about how to look at your past. Because sometimes we get into the habit, or we might even just have the tendency, maybe, let's say, to let the things that have happened to us in the past dictate how our lives are going to forever be. Basically kind of using what happened in the past to as an excuse, if you will, as to why we're not doing what we want to do in our life now. And then the question is, will we allow that to happen like forever? So do you get what I'm saying? Sometimes people use what has happened to them in the past as a reason or an excuse as to why they're not where they want to be in their life currently, and then even sometimes let it last a lifetime. So this story by Alan Watts is called The Wake, and it's basically a story that asks 3 questions. And I'm going to look at the questions as I talk about this story, because he talks about it being like, he talks about life being like a boat. And I love like stories like that because I'm always like, life is like this or life is like that. But this story is that life is like a boat, and it's going up the river, like 40 watts or so up the river, and it's leaving behind a wake. And you no doubt know what a wake is. It's basically the trail left behind in the water by a boat as it's moving forward, right? And this referred to as the wake. And he says that we should have 3 questions that we ask ourselves if we were to metaphorically be standing on the stern of the boat or the back of the boat and looking down at that wake. And the first question is, what is the wake? Right? And we kind of alluded to the answer to that. And the answer is that it's basically just the trail left behind as the boat is moving up the river. Right? Well, the second question that he asks in this story is that, let's say this. What's driving the boat? That's what he asked. What's driving the boat? And again, the answer is that it's the current, energy from the engine that is driving the boat up the river. And so again, if we were to look at what that would mean, is that it's our present moment thoughts that we ourselves have too, just like that engine that drives our lives up the river. All right, so that's what we're going to compare the source of energy, the engine, to being our present thoughts that we have in our minds. And we talked about thoughts just the other day, if you're following my YouTube channel, and the importance of having positive thoughts. Well, the third question that he asks in this story is that it's really the most powerful one too. And that is, Is it possible for the wake to drive the boat? Is it possible for the wake, that trail left behind, to drive the boat? Right? It's a really interesting question. And this is a question that we can ask ourselves whenever we find ourselves having the tendency to, blame or using as an excuse the things that have happened to us in the past as to why we're not where we want to be in our lives. Is it possible for the wake to drive the boat? Well, obviously the answer is no. So the same goes for the things that have happened to us in the past. Are those the things that should drive our lives, or can they even do so? Generally, we find ourselves just on an autopilot, if you will, just leaving the boat to drive itself and not being really proactive in the driving of this boat. And it might appear that the wake is driving the boat, but really the boat is just on autopilot. The wake cannot drive the boat, folks. Never could you imagine that to happen, right? So the same thing with all of the stuff that is left behind in our lives and that have happened in our lives, it can't be left to excuse us from doing and being who or what we want to be. We can't continue to use that. So if we honestly sit back and ask ourselves, have I been letting that be the excuse as to, like, maybe my parents didn't love me enough, or maybe they loved me too much, or again, I was always talked down to, or people just praised me too much, or whatever the situation was in our lives. Are we going to allow that to always be the case? So not that we really shouldn't be in touch with the past, but it's really about us using it as an excuse as to why we can't get to where we're going, and we can't do what we want to do, or we can't be what we want to be. The wake cannot drive the boat. The trail left behind cannot drive the boat. So basically we have to take the wheel in our own hands and steer the boat and use the engine, our minds, to get the boat in the direction that we want it to be in. So hopefully that metaphor makes sense in terms of how we look at our lives. And I'll use myself as a quick example before I go, and that is that my father, as you might know, had just passed about a month or so ago. But we have been really kind of estranged for some years, and mainly because he was never around as a father when I was growing up. So my mom left my father when I was about 8 years old. We moved to Dallas, Texas. I grew up there until I was 16. And then when they finally got a divorce, when I was 16, we moved back to Boston. And that's how I ended up in Boston, because my mom got the house in the divorce. But the point being is that my father was never really a dad growing up. We didn't really have a relationship. He didn't help my mom raise us either physically or monetarily. He never gave any child support or anything like that to us. So, but I could have let that continue to fester within me. But I'd say about 7 or 8 years ago, I actually reached out to him, started trying to build a relationship with him as a father and son. It didn't really go anywhere long term, but the reason why I did that is because I knew that it was important for me to go to my father, have conversations with him. I actually told him at that time that I had forgiven him for not having been there and not having been a father to me. And I'm not exactly sure if he even understood why I was forgiving him for that, but I wasn't doing it for him. I was actually doing it for myself. And it allowed me like this amazing freedom at the time in my life where I didn't have to have any hostility or hard feelings even against him, because, I had decided that it was what it was at the time, and I was going to let that wake just be that. and then try to start something fresh from there. Again, as I mentioned, it didn't go very far up until recently. Again, I had the opportunity to reconnect with him when he had his leg amputated, but unfortunately, we only had a short but sweet 3 weeks of us getting a chance to reconnect and bond again before he ended up passing away. But boy, am I so glad that that happened, and that I had actually already laid the groundwork before then through forgiveness, true forgiveness from my heart. And that's why I could just jump right in and help him when he had his amputation without any qualms, because I was already good with him and with my creator too. So, and that made me feel good. So anyway, the point is that don't let the wake or the things that have happened or didn't happen for you in your past, don't think that you can allow that to drive your boat, your life, but rather take hold of the engine, this mind here, these thoughts that we have here, and let those drive your boat in the direction in where you want it to be. All right? All right, folks, I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. So peace and hair grease, and let's go.